and welcome to the SheClicks webinar about image selection. I'm Angela Nicholson and I'm the founder of SheClicks. Now, before we get started, we have a word from our sponsor, which is Affinity Photo. If you could create your own photo editing software for working on your best images, it would work like this. Whether it's quick corrections, delicate retouching, or immersing yourself in complex fine art with hundreds of layers, Affinity Photo has you covered on Mac, PC, and iPad with no subscription. Go to affinity.serif.com/photo to start your journey. So thanks very much, Affinity Photo. Tonight's webinar is presented by Laura Noble, who is an artist, gallerist, curator, collector, writer, feminist, educator, and mentor, which is quite a long list, Laura. Hello, welcome to SheClicks webinar.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello there. No, it is a long list, but they're all equally important.
Yes,
so they have to all be in there.
Excellent. Good, good. Yeah. Anyway, I know that you have put a lot of effort into your presentation tonight. You've got a lot to get through. So if you would like to take over.
And I shall share my screen. Well, firstly, thank you for having me. Thanks, Andrew. I've really enjoyed sort of putting this together because it's a subject that's close to my heart, but it's something that I discuss all the time with my artists and with the people I work with. So you can probably tell from the introduction, I work with a lot of women in terms of the artists I represent. I have a majority of female artists on my books as a gallerist, but I also curate independently as well. So there's it's quite often that I do work with other people outside of LA Noble Gallery, or Lang, as I will refer to it, because it's a lot quicker to say. So what I want to do is talk to you with some examples of artists, of exhibitions, things that there's a lot of crossovers in all of the people I'm talking about in terms of their exhibiting, their books, all sorts of things, and in relation to those photographs and the choices that were made when those things were displayed or put together. So I'm going to start with portfolio reviews. Now, I do a lot of portfolio reviews. I do one-to-one through Lang, where I have an hour-long session or a mentor session, which is often goes on for some time. Sometimes I'll do, once a month with somebody, or we do a lot of sessions over the course of a year. It varies from person to person and what they need. But a lot of the time, photographers have to do portfolio reviews for 20 minutes. So they go to festivals and it's quite a lot of pressure. 20 minutes with one person who's never met you, never seen your work before. It's very hard to figure out, what do I put in that portfolio? Which are my strongest images? Which are the best things that I can show? And, for all of us, we've all got our own preferences, and it is subjective. So the things that you think are great might not be the things that somebody you're showing thinks are great, but you have to have some sort of standard and quality to what you do. So everything that you start with is there for the editing. So one thing I always tell people, don't be afraid to kill your darlings. What might be your favorite image might not be the image that everyone responds to. It might be that the reason that image is your favorite is because you remember taking it, you remember what was going on, you remember the weather, you remember the person, something wonderful happened on that day, you were really happy with the light and you hadn't been happy with a previous image you'd taken where the light wasn't quite right. The person coming to that image afresh has never seen it before. They're not going to have the same connection to it. So you have to kind of bear that in mind. So what I'd suggest is, if you're going to do a portfolio review with somebody for a short space of time, think about how many images, how long have I got? So 20 minutes, 20 images is a minute per image, plus introducing yourself and explaining the project as you go. So, and discussing it potentially afterwards. So think about it that way. 20 to 30 images is enough. You start getting over that and somebody forgets it, the beginning, the middle, or the end. So what I'd suggest is lay everything out. Here we've got an amazing array of images by lots of different artists here that I represent. And you can see even here, the way I've laid them out on the screen, you have different images next to different subjects, but we've got black and white next to color. The black and white isn't all grouped together, so it has room to breathe. So if you think about that, a portfolio reviewer may lay everything out on the table, or they may neatly go through it. So remember that order has got to be quite flexible. So keep your vision clean and clear. Think about what you want that project to say, what you want your portfolio to say about you. Is it about your technique? Is it about a specific project in its entirety? How do you tell that story in 20 images or less, or 30 images or less? Different edits will work with different people. So when you're going to see somebody, think about what they're doing and what their job is and how that relates to what you do. So if you do lay everything out and look at it, try and get as many people as you can to look at that work. Do a straw poll, you know, ask friends, ask family, ask colleagues, other photographers. You know, here's two images that are quite similar. Which one do you prefer? Which one speaks to you? Why? What do you get from it? Because if you're not there to explain it, you want that image to really be punchy and stand out. So I've sort of given a little bit of a cheat sheet here, but it's good to kind of think of these things coming to your review or coming to show somebody your portfolio. It might be a commercial portfolio, so that operates in a very different way. You usually have 30 to 50 images maybe in that. So how long is the work going to be viewed for? Which images best represent what you do or that project? And choose them, see which ones sum it up. But also think about the big hitters. There'll be key images in there that people really notice, that always get commented on, that people always connect to. You want something really punchy at the start that's going to get somebody's attention, something in the middle that's going to anchor the piece, that might be the focal point of a project. And how does it end? Does it sort of dribble away, or does it end with a bang? You want people to remember everything. So if you can pick out your three or four key images and space those throughout the project, if you had to tell that story in 3 or 4 images, what are those images? And that's a really good way of kind of fast forwarding that edit, but be flexible with it. An edit for one person might not work for another. And your vision is important, but the person you're showing it to is, because like myself, people like curators, they like to tell different stories by using what they're given. So I'm giving you some examples here, and I'm going to start and work through these quite quickly because there's a lot to show you, because it's much more fun to look at pictures than just to look at me and hear me waffle throughout it. I think it's really important that you kind of see the diversity of what's out there and what's being shown, but also some of it you'll connect to and some of it you won't, and that's okay. I've started off with Deborah Baker, who is this extraordinary artist who uses a lot of different techniques and quite complex Photoshop, and she creates these wonderful amazing organic images which are full of life. Now this image that was used in Paradiso was our lead image. So this was the image that we put on the invitation. This was quite central to the exhibition. So I've given a couple of examples here of when we used it and how we used it. So on the bottom right there, so you can see I've done these. I often do models and miniatures of things. This particular one on the bottom right, somebody even made the furniture. I think an assistant got quite carried away and made the furniture for the space. So it really felt like you were walking into it. But we made everything to scale so that we could see how it would feel. And again, you can see there, the central image is there. And at the top here, this is a different plan for an art fair. So when we actually showed the work, you can see here on the right, how strong that image is shine through. It's a really punchy image. It's higher up, so it has to be viewed from a distance. So it makes sense for it to be higher up. The image that's lower down is sort of angled and looking up and creating that diagonal. And we actually took out, so here we actually took out an image. So if we look back here, you can see there's 4. And then we went down to 3 because I wanted to mirror this space here, because everything has to complement everything else. It's really close together. So when it came to choosing, there are some images which are quite dense, where you can see a lot of detail. There are some images where there's something central to it and quite strong. one object within it, and then everything dissipates out. And others which sort of tell the story. I mean, it's always worth thinking about punctuation. When you're putting a book together, there are images that are always sort of the stars, but then there are images that often give you those pauses, those breaks that might move a story along, tell the story, whether that's a narrative, whether it's documentary, photojournalism, or whether it is all abstraction. There are certain things that burn quieter and take longer to look at. And you need to give them room to breathe and to make that happen. So I just thought I'd show you a couple more of Deborah's full scale so you can see the revel in the beauty of these, because they are quite fabulous. I actually have this one in my bedroom, and that's a more recent one from a more recent series, and they're absolutely gorgeous. So that was just a little taster of an artist, and I wish I could talk about everybody for a lot longer, but time is not on our side. So I'd invite you all to have a look on the website, and obviously in terms of portfolio reviews and things, hopefully at some point I'll be able to meet people in person again, but we do them online as well. So maybe I'll meet some of you after this. It'd be really nice. So the next series and body of work that I'm going to talk about is Wendy Aldis. Now, I met Wendy a long time ago. We did a portfolio review. Her work really blew me away, and what she was doing was kind of incredible. To sort of very quickly explain the project, after her father passed away, she decided in her wisdom to photograph everything that he owned. So she has more than 9,000 images, which is extraordinary. But it was a wonderful way for her to connect with her father, to look at, you know, the things that we leave behind. And it's a fascinating project. I mean, she photographed everything from his toothpaste to his slippers. So you really get a sense of a human being. And, you know, to her, it's her dad. To many people, Brian Aldis is a famous writer and poet and artist that you know, is known the world over, but to her, his dad. And this really intimate project, I thought was extraordinary. And it's now wonderfully, I now represent her at Lang. There's a book which I absolutely encourage you to get, which is fabulous too. In fact, talking about selections, I've got my copy here, which is full of tabs from when we were making choices for putting up her artist page very recently. And I wanted to start off with this one because I thought this was a really key image. When I did an exhibition called Occupy the Void, which was all female, all women over 50, there were 10 artists, a very specific space, and we really had to approach every single area for each artist in a very democratic way, but also make sure that we got the most out of all the images and they all connected together. And the show was about how we take up space. It wasn't about women being over 50. And it was an extraordinary project, and this work really fitted with it. But how we had to approach the space was very different than maybe approaching a book. So in the book and in the body of work, you see lots of multiple objects like here, but you also see wonderful shots of the house and the things in it, the light. So we decided, we had a discussion about what could be in this space and what furniture was there that was still available for us to use, and actually ended up creating this entire installation and artwork in itself, which is wonderful, with her father's desk and bookcase. So we sort of recreated a study. So one thing in terms of selection in images and finding the best images for the project, we had to think about what things would be in this study and what did we want to include. So obviously we had the desk. So what goes on top of a desk, computer, pens, pots, all sorts of things, but also what was going in drawers. So we had these wonderful opportunity. So here back in the day when people could gather, we had this wonderful opportunity to really show quite a lot of the dimensions of this human being. without them being present. So through their objects and through their things. So we had quite a lot to plan, but because we honed in on one room, we knew what wasn't needed. So it's a good way of editing out quite a large chunk of what was possible. We sat down and we had a big discussion. So of course, here's Wendy herself. So we placed all these objects on the bookcase, and even choosing the right books was interesting. Finding variety, looking at color, looking at the palette, looking at what things were next to, what other things could go on a bookcase. So here you can see this. I often, like I said before, I do these little models. So these are really small, one on the left and one on the right, where we sort of made these selections and looked at the scale of things. They're almost, most of the images are virtually human, normal scale on the bookcase. Some are slightly bigger, some are slightly larger, but you know, you kind of really get a feel for the things themselves, so that when we did translate that full size, you could really engage with it. I mean, what I love about this here is we had this wonderful photograph of the back of a painting, which her dad had left this wonderful message on. People really felt very close to it. In fact, the lovely coat hanging on a hook there, Wendy's wearing in this photograph, which is very cool. So that selection wasn't just about the best photos, it was about the best photos for the job that they were going to do, for the space they were going to be in. And that I'm going to keep kind of reiterating. You'll see this coming through over and over again as I'm talking. And you can really create something wondrous and interactive with that. You know, if you slip up there, that's when things start to get a bit woolly. It's not supposed to be completely realistic. It's supposed to feel like you're viewing objects and things that are in an exhibition, but it really does give you a feel of what something was and what something is. And you can imagine yourself in it a lot easier. So even here, you can see in this sort of long shot, how even the palette, so there are these blues, which started dark and got lighter throughout the exhibition, sort of travel through the exhibition. You have to think about how you're going to view it from each side. And we even had Brian's artwork as well, which was wonderful, and so much to choose from. It was really hard, but in the end decided on these three main paintings here. But you can see in the house itself, so that obviously this wasn't in the show, but you know, these things were all over the house, and you really get a sense of person from what they put on the walls. Now this is another of Wendy's. Now if you'd seen this on its own, and essentially might think it's a commercial image, and it'd be absolutely fine as a commercial image, but it isn't right for that particular setting, which doesn't take away from the fact it's a fantastic punchy image, which once you've seen it, it's in your head and it's fantastic. And the closer you look, you start to see the patina of the cup. I always say, or if it's toothpaste, I'm not quite sure. You know, a great image often will have an immediate impact, but will then slowly keep your attention, and you'll find things in that you don't quite essentially see. Some of the quieter images do, which I call the slower burn, do really have an impact, but they take longer. So how someone's going to view something, how long they're going to stand in front of it or sit with it, can often give you an idea of what you select. Again, another wonderful, bright, punchy image. So I'm just going to let you have a quick look at that before I twist through. I know these very well. The detail, I mean, this was wonderful. I love the interior shots. So in the book, obviously, I mean, this is a big book. You do get a lot of other information, and you get a feel, because if it was too repetitious, you would lose interest in all these objects. So also having that sense of place is really important, and you can do more of that storytelling in a book. So it's a different type of storytelling. Doesn't mean anyone's more important than the other. It's just the best place for that particular image. So for example, here, this is the image which we use as a lead image, for want of a better word. This is the image that you see on the website, on social media, when her link's put up. online, this is the image that pops up. We've gone for something really bright, shows the father's sort of eccentric, wonderful sense of style, and these psychedelic ties, but also something very personal and meaningful, and something that was worn. So again, you get both facets of the project. You get something that shows the exuberance of the person, but also something very intimate about them as well. And that's really what this project's about. And all the images and things pivot back and forth on those two themes, which is gorgeous. And moments of poetry and quiet and absolute utter beauty. I absolutely love this image. So that's the book. There is an offer on the website. So if you do want to have a look, do have a look at her work, and more of it there, as with all these artists. So the same exhibition, Occupy the Void. You can see here, we did a publication, which is, I've got here, which is a wonderful thing. We did like a newspaper, which, big shout out there to Jenny Nash and Kezia Blaine for helping with that, because they were amazing. Couldn't have done it without them. Each artist only had one image to represent their work with. So in this particular one, Wendy, we actually chose, here we go. So you can see here, the one that I showed you first with the picture of her dad and the cutout there. So finding one image to encompass a project isn't the same image for the show as it would be for the artist's statement. So moving on to the next artist, who was also in Occupy, is Danielle Peck, the wondrous Danielle Peck. Now, I love this project, but it was huge. Dreamland is this amazing look at, it's a very nostalgic portrait of Margate and all the things that go on there. The people, the place, the environment, the quirkiness of the place. Also, you know, the sort of faded, gorgeous stuff, which of course I love. And when I saw this project, I thought there were certain images that really stood out to me that really went with the exhibition, about taking up space and how we fill space. I was looking at interior spaces, exterior spaces. So you can see on that last picture, the exhibition starts on the outside. You start with these buildings, like those by Sandra Jordan, and then you go into Danielle's work. So again, limited space. We had to really be selective. I decided to sort of focus in and reimagining a very specific spaces with the interiors of a boarding house, which was quite run down. I think it was sold and refurbished and taken over and completely changed. And luckily Danielle got these pictures before that happened. And they really stood out for me. There was very much a lot of nostalgia there, but they really had this amazing patina, which only comes from things from a certain era. So this was the image we used in the publication, and this is the sort of image that ended up on the press release as well. And it does a lot of things. It does all the things that you want your focal image to do. It delivers a concept. It shows that this is a personal space that is no longer being used, that once had been cared about, now isn't quite up to its former glory. But there's a sense, there is a beauty in there. There is a beauty in this picture. There's something so engaging about it. The light, the television, dead center, the way that it's almost addressing you when you look at it. The proportions, everything seems to have sort of you just want to walk into that space. And so, but it didn't really go with the other images, but it felt like it was really important to be in there. So when I started thinking about how I was going to lay this out, this image sort of was the image that was at the start, which was then underneath we had the book so people could see the rest of the project. So this thing about, oh, but what about the other images that were in the project that were really good? They're not destroyed by not being shown. They're just not present in that particular, they're present in a different way. And you always want people to want more. So you can see here we had this wonderful layout. So I started to think about how these sort of windows into these spaces worked. I'm always looking at portals. It's something that I have a bit of a weak spot for. I use quite a lot. So here we've actually got two images, not one. But I love that these two images, when put next to each other, sort of became one photograph. It was almost as if you were walking, you could walk down those stairs and into that room. Whereas in fact, they were two separate photographs. But as a curator, my job is to reimagine and start to think about how these things can, how we can tell stories and how we can lead the audience into another space and into another era, but also how they can kind of imagine themselves in front of these things. So I paired up the palette. I looked at the compositions and the detail and started to put these things together. So the eye instinctually does make comparisons and start to try and make connections between things, but it actually means that you hold your gaze for longer. So this is really useful, especially when you're laying things out and you're showing people things that, yes, avoid showing the same thing twice, but if there's a way that you can actually show those connections and those two things feeding from each other, you can really progress a story, tell a narrative, draw somebody into that world. So here you can see we've paired up the palette. You have the amazing red television. The turquoise sort of is quite subtle, but it picks up in the curtains. The line which goes across almost matches with the line of the sink. So from one image to another, you tend to sort of, this wonderful dance starts to happen. Again, here, two incredibly similar images, but with strong enough color palette that each of them really punchy. Again, they both operate harmoniously together, but also separately. And another good thing, if somebody, often people buy what they see. So if you present things in pairs, someone's more likely to buy two than one, which is also definitely a good tip. So I can't talk about other people's book covers and things without briefly mentioning my own, because I thought that would be unfair. This is the cover for my collecting book, which came out a while ago now, and the cover image is by the glorious Nita Madahar, who actually told me about, introduced me to She Clicks, so a shout out to her as well. And this image for me was the perfect cover image. I said no to a lot of other images and I've refused and said, this isn't right, this isn't right. I've been sent lots of very dull black and white things, even a page of signatures of art of photographers, which the book was not about, handwriting. And when I saw this, I knew instantly that it was the right image. And the reason it was the right image was it did what it needed to do. It was a photograph, perfect. It was a photograph of something contemporary, but it referenced something very, very old and almost at the origins of photography. So for me, when I saw this, I saw Victoriana, I saw Victorian wallpaper, I saw this cacophony of nature all together, connected, but also done in such a way, this hyper way, which really brought it to the present day. So the two things sort of bouncing off each other worked really, really well. So for me, this cover did what, this image did what I needed it to do. So I thought that was really important not to miss out on. So now I have quite a lot of images by Yvonne de Rosa, but very different projects. So I'm going to whiz through these fairly quickly so that we're not overrunning. So this is a great example of how one photographer who's very versatile and does lots of different projects over a long period, these are over quite a long period of time, how they are used and have an impact in different ways and how we kind of had to adapt them, much like the others. So Crazy God is a wonderful book. It's an amazing series of work, body of work. It's all about a mental home, which Yvonne had actually volunteered in many years ago, which was very dilapidated and run down, not very pleasant at all. and had thankfully been closed. And she actually asked permission to go in, was refused, and broke in and had about 3.5 hours to photograph a building, luckily that she knew very well, and to get as many pictures as she could of this to really capture what she was looking at, this incredible space, before the police came and arrested her. So, and shooed her away. And you can see here the different quality of the images this is done from film, so it has a very different feel to it than some of the other digital images. So as well as these incredible architectural images, she also scanned objects. There are details of very specific things here, the records of people, things that really shouldn't have been left that were. So here you've got 4 different images. You've got this wonderful, what's great about this is these, you know, these almost mirror the beds, the shape of a bed on the floor, the light. There's something very intimate about the close-up shots of the things that were found there. And when it came to the book, there's actually 2 narratives in the book. So there's an essay by myself, and there's also a wonderful story by a South American author who wrote stories around these pictures. So again, showing that versatility of interpretation. So the image that maybe you might have picked as your favorite that you've just seen might not perhaps be this one, but this is the image that's on the cover, and it's perfect for the cover. The reason being is, for me, you have this amazing encapsulation of everything that this project's about. We have the architecture, you have the emptiness of the space, the furniture here, this being open, the bed. So all of those elements which are repeated throughout the book are all there. The sense of presence and something gone, the various elements, it's not romanticizing it, it's just showing the sort of amazing atmosphere that's in that space for that fleeting moment. So sort of moving on from that, Yvonne did another project called Hidden Identities Unfinished. So Yvonne had photographed this extraordinary these lovely little kids who all didn't have official identities in the countries they were living in. They didn't really belong in that sense, that they couldn't have a passport, and they're sort of in this awful limbo. And the whole project being about children, it made sense that, you know, the Museum of Childhood should show it. So we had this wonderful exhibition. I had to be really versatile in how this work was presented. And what they did, as many shows do now, it was quite unusual then, they did these amazing sort of wallpapers. You can see here from the plan how large the pieces were. And again, there's a book and there are lots of images to choose from. So when it comes to actually selecting for things like this, it's really difficult to sum up an entire project, but you have to do it with what you have. So we launched the book, we had an amazing exhibition. We looked at certain images that really kind of were powerful. And in this set of 3, as you can see here, the one in the center really stands out. Now, all the other images are fantastic, but the reason this stands out isn't just because it's a powerful picture, but because of the red. And red is the warmest color here. We have orange either side, which also comes forward. Cooler colors recede, but because it's red, because it's the hottest color, it comes further forward. There's whole theories about red, especially red covered books and things like that. But you can see how powerful it is. And that red dress is very important to that little girl as well. So again, with the narrative of the project, it really made sense to show it. So you can see here how this image, even though it's quite small, becomes very prominent. But the establishing images, the environment, the place were also present. So you really had a sense of being in those spaces, as well as being up close and personal with those gorgeous children. You also have these sort of incidental things that you often ignore. But to photographers and artists and people like ourselves, we find really engaging and interesting, and present to people and show how interesting they are. And also, you know, in this particular space, this is the private view, so there aren't too many tiny humans there, but, you know, children are going to be going in and out of there. So having an image that's on a wall which is large but right down to the ground meant that they could feel like they were going right into it and could put their hands on it and be right in front of that work and feel like they were in the picture. So again, it was about utilizing the space and showing that sort of powerful language without being too precious about it. So when you're selecting work, think about where it's going to be, how it's going to be seen. Is it going to be handled? It's very easy to get, especially in the fine art world. But when you're selecting your best images, think about the person who's going to see it for the first time. What are they going to get from it? And things that are familiar. So here, you know, we've got the Toy Story chap, which we relate to. And again, book cover, really powerful, really punchy, very direct. Little boy in the center, really is wonderful. That sort of direct gaze, looking straight at you, very centered in it, and it works central frame here. A square, always really good to have something dead center if you can. Not always, but a square either feels right or wrong. I do love a square, and this is really powerful because of it. You can't really ignore this face. So I wanted to quickly mention festivals, because festivals are things that a lot of people attend or apply to be in or enter competitions and things like that. I run a festival every 2 years. This was last year's, so we had a theme, Fix Still Life, which was very apt for the predicament we all found ourselves in. And, you know, I didn't think it was going to be possible to do a show. Luckily, I sort of managed to get the hang of working in a virtual space, which for me was an interesting curatorial move. And so we staged the awards. So we ran a competition. We had 2 categories. We had the singles and the series. Now, one thing sort of to think about when you're entering things like this, whether it's a competition in, you know, wherever it is if there are different categories, don't be afraid to enter multiples, because the same image might be relevant for both, or one image out of a series might work as a single. We had so many amazing entries. In the series category, we absolutely could have shown more. There were some incredible ones that didn't get through just because we didn't have enough wall space to put everything. We were limited, you know, I was limited in how much wall space. So think about that when you're choosing. You might be limited on how many images. So I've just been a nominator for the Oscar Barnack Award, and they have sort of, you know, 15 to 20 images as a series. So there's a very specific limitation. Here we had our series category was 10. So again, you need to think about how you can sum that up. And if you get used to doing that, you'll get a lot better at editing and pulling together and finding your key images. So again, with Yvonne, different again, we've got Albania for Rent. This was at a previous, I think at the first Fixed Photo Festival. And we only had room, because we had a lot of artists in that show. And again, we had to tell this very specific story in very few images. So it was a combination of vintage photographs and contemporary photographs that Yvonne had taken. So we looked at 3 different elements to sum up the project. You have the internal space, the ruins of something that once was, and this more contemplative, environmental, thoughtful, philosophical image alongside the vintage vernacular photographs. So even the light source, which is coming into the room, makes sense in terms of where it is. And, you know, the size of those prints, picking the large ones, but there were lots to choose from, but the ones that made the most sense were the ones that made you feel that you just wanted to walk into them. So you can see here, this has really got, you know, you kind of want to be her. You kind of can be just by standing in front of it, which is great. So to sort of carry on from that, one of the projects that I was very happy made it to Arles in 2019 was Negativo 1930, which is another really extraordinary body of work that she did. And you can actually see this in 3D on the Lang website, you can go in and do a virtual tour, as you can with Fix. All the galleries are still up. There's 4 galleries. So do go and have a look and have a wander around and click on things and see what the artists say, because again, little captions can be really useful, but aren't always present when you're, you know, if you're just choosing images, that's one thing, but they can also inform. So it's always the thing that you're battling with when you're trying to show something. How do you make something really exciting, tell a huge story, but just with pictures? Like, that's the challenge. And it's amazing when it works and when it flows. So this one, this very involved story, was about an event that happened in 1930 where a young woman was murdered. She got pregnant, and when she told the chap who got her pregnant, he killed her instead of giving her an engagement ring, which is what she was hoping for. So this sort of engagement ring was sort of ringing in my head when I heard, you know, when she told me about the project. And when I sort of put the work together, we looked at both the black and white, and there's one color image. And so what I did was created in this room a ring with a stone. So the red infrared image became the stone, and the band was the rest of the photograph. So it's very central. You can kind of feel it. You can kind of go in circles when you're in that space, and you can really feel it. And also the project was about how once this poor woman, her body was found, it was washed up, the hair was washed up separately to her body. There was a young woman in the town who felt that she was getting messages from her and that she'd seen her, and there was this sort of mass hysteria in the town. So what Yvonne did was she sort of looked at these 2 worlds of reality and the spirit world, and she used the positive and negative images to represent. So the negative here, these images representing the spirit world, and the positive images sort of connecting with the real world, but also this very sort of mystical imagery, which sort of plays with your mind a bit. So when we were looking at, you know, this was the image that became our lead image for the invitations, for the, you know, promotion leaflets and things. We wanted something that was punchy, clear, not the obvious, you know, not the red one. Red's great, but this image for me, the simplicity of it and the complexity of it, you know, really gave, you know, it's heart-wrenching. You know, this is representing the birth that didn't happen. It's in negative. You know, it wasn't just one death. There's this, it's very dark, but it's also very beautiful. So pivoting back and forth with those themes, finding one image that can do that. It's always good to think about that when you're doing a project, which is, I have to just pick one. It's a good place to start. So time is flying. Okay, so I'm moving on very swiftly here to Chloe Rosser, who again, another great artist that I represent, and the book's amazing too. I did this project. Now, Form was the first series, Function was the second. We showed both together. And here's an image that you're probably familiar with. If not, do have a look. It's a wonderful work. And the book. She was really open to my ideas and how this could be conceived as an exhibition, because the book contains a lot of images, and pairing out and finding the right ones to sort of give these extraordinary unphotoshopped bodies. There's no Photoshop. These are not models. These are life models. They're ordinary people. There's no retouching. It's really about these human sculptures in space, and the 2 things interacting. It's not about perfection. When you get close up to them, you can see everything: scars, freckles, bra marks, everything. And where things were placed. So here, I just put this in because I thought it was a wonderful example. Even the image on this page that goes with the essay fits the page. It makes sense that this quiet, solitary image that sort of, it puts you in the place you want to be to read. You don't want something punchy and jazzy on that page. It needs to be something quiet to think about. Okay, I'm going to read, and I'm going to spend time with this now. So we had a lot of fun. So here, one of my favorite things ever is this diagonal hang where we hang the picture across the corner. We played with the actual space because the work's about how the body is in space. It made sense to do this. So we've got this extraordinary figure on its own on the left and the two figures on the right. Now there are quite a few positions here in terms of this particular set of models, but those two were the ones that we decided to use, so that there was this sense of more than one person in this space, but also the added interaction of the physical space itself. There was some fun in there. So again, different color palette, different body type, skin tones, the environment's changed. There's something quite witty and fun about this. And how you could view them. So even the space itself, we had works which were on stands in the middle of the room. We thought about the impact to the audience, so they actually had to bend and look at things differently, because otherwise, if they were all just in a neat row, yes, you'd address them and look at them closely, but there was something about the physicality of viewing them and looking at them in different sizes and different configurations, which really energized the exhibition. So you can see here how, four of the same person in the same environment, each image in itself is very strong, but grouped together and in this sort of dynamic way brought something else to it. So sometimes it is about pairing things up and finding things connecting, but don't try and repeat yourself. So if you're going to include something, is it repetitive, or is it truly bouncing and connecting and having a conversation with the work that's next to it? So here you can see these works which we had upright on stands in the show. So this one we had two. There was one where an arm was leaning over and the two were more central in the room. And we picked this one because it had something of a narrative. Every time I look at it, I imagine the conversation they're having. Why are we in the corner again? What's going on? I don't know. We really must stop meeting like this. All these things run through my head of something that's actually quite, could also be interpreted as something quite somber. So we kind of, these really are incredible things to see every day and to look at. And then you sort of get these more poetic, beautiful connections of the body. This one I can't look at without thinking of a violin and music. So we sort of played with the harmony of a space. This one feels much more statuesque. And then sometimes an image gives you something fabulous. So this one, even though it's not my favorite image, the minute I saw it, I knew exactly where it was going. And the space that the show was, the entire right side of the room was just windows. So this was on this wonderful curved wall, and people kept standing in front of it to see if their shadow was going to change the light on the picture, which of course it wasn't, because it was on the picture. So even how large something is, and I always suggest to people in terms of thinking about which image is right, think about the size, think about where it's going to be, how you're going to interact with it. So even though this isn't the star image, isn't the main image of the show, it's not the image that was on the invitations, it has its place and it makes sense to be in that space and engaged in that space, and wonderfully reflects the similar sort of colored floorboards as well. So again, that was a gift. So you can see here it was in two rooms, and you can sort of see the flow of the space and how it was arranged. So this is the last artist I'm going to talk about. Pretty all exhausted by now. So this is Chloe Bowman, who's a wonderful emerging artist who I did an Instagram live with a little while ago. Some of you might have watched. She's amazing. She does these extraordinary things with dead animals, which are all die of natural causes. She doesn't kill them. She worked in a place that bred exotic animals as well, so she had access to these incredible creatures. And we did a virtual solo show. So this was a first, really. How do we kind of create something and find the right images? We had several bodies of work. No pun intended, would have worked for the last one as well. But we also put them all together in a way that would feel right. So that show, even though it's finished, is still up on the website. You can have a look. Do have a tour through of it and see, because I can only show a few here. But I wanted to sort of give you an idea into the selection process and how that worked. So I looked at what was going to be large, what was going to be small, what was going to be included, what wasn't. So a pair, this is just one selection which is in one area of the show. And even though all these, I love all of them, there is an image or two in here which aren't really Chloe's favorite, but again, she trusted me on this. So what I started to do is start to think about these connections and how they would work together. And it soon became apparent as I was looking, and again, I did what I suggested at the beginning. I usually make everything to scale. So everything was printed out to scale in a small size and a large size. And I played around with which worked together and which configurations I was going to go for in the physical, so that then I could translate that into the virtual. And I started to think about these sort of brackets. So it's almost like speech marks, and how these two things sort of bounce off each other. So you get this lovely, these wonderful shapes and angles where things sort of frame something or frame each other and hinge back and forth. And then with the triptychs, again, there might be two things that are fairly similar in terms of palette or the bird itself. And we used one of the central images to sort of break that up, and so that when you do walk through something and walk past something, you're not going to you're going to stop at each individual thing, because you've got that pause in the middle and that break in the middle. You address each thing individually. So again, think about that if you're laying out a portfolio or something. It might be that you need a visual break in terms of theme, because two things that are too similar might cancel each other out. I mean, the bunnies are sort of perfect for example for this. So this is how they ended up on the wall. And you can see here how the rabbits really come into their own. And you do make those comparisons, but because they're not right next to each other, you can sort of go back and forth, stop in the middle, really take it in. Play on scale as well was really fun, because obviously the bird's a lot smaller than a bunny, but because they're printed and the way that she works with them, you know, this scale starts to change. So again, I wanted to sort of, when you're choosing, think about what your perfect experience would be, as if you were just walking in and seeing it for the first time. Try some options, you know, lay things out, photograph them and see which ones work. Do a few layouts and send them to friends and say, which one do you like? Which one in your gut do you engage with the most? And yeah, see what happens. So I'm going to stop talking now. I've just put my info up there if anyone wants to contact, but obviously I'm sure that's all on the site anyway, so that if anyone wants to, you know, book a session or have a chat or whatever, yeah, I'm very grateful to be here, and yeah, thank you for having me. And God help me, I'm open for questions. So yeah, I'll brace myself.
Thanks, Laura. That was fantastic.
That was a lot, wasn't it?
There was an amazing array of pictures. Everybody has been commenting on how much they liked them, so you made a great choice.
Phew. You never know. You never know.
We have a few questions.
Okay. Can I have a quick sip of tea beforehand?
Of course you can.
Okay,
right.
I'm fired up.
So I'm going to start with one from Susan first. Okay. She asked on Facebook, does there necessarily need to be a story? Can you just have a group of images that work well together?
Yeah, why not? I mean, I think, yeah, there doesn't have to be a story in anything, but it, you know, you want people to realize why those things are together. If it's something that's completely random and they've been thrown together, somebody will ask why, but it doesn't have to be a narrative. It might just be that it's a lot of the same thing in different colors or whatever it is. But yeah, no, it doesn't have to be a story. And also, when I talk about story, I don't necessarily mean a story. It might be that those images in themselves create a narrative, which my job often is to find narratives within narratives, and find ways that I can tell something which perhaps isn't the whole but might be part of it. So yeah, absolutely, I don't see why not.
And also, I think if you put a selection of images on a wall or on a page, people start to join them together and make some sort of narrative, don't they? Even if they were completely
Absolutely.
unconnected, they thought they
I,
work together.
yeah, and also the angle that you're going from. If I'm doing an essay for a book, I ask people to send me lots of small, just printed on a normal printer or anything, but all the images, and I make what I call a serial killer wall, and everything goes up on the wall. And my poor husband will come home and go, oh yeah, be naked bodies all over the wall or whatever it is. He has to live with it. But and I live with them, and different things occur to you as you see them, and as you start, and I make notes. I just have a notebook by it, and I make notes, and then I wake up about 2 weeks later, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I write the whole thing in one go, because I've found what it is that's bothering me about them, or what the angle is. It's like anything with images, you've got to find a way in and a way to deliver that, and it's not always the same intention, but yeah, it's fun. It's a good bit. It's a good bit of the job.
Okay. Now you did kind of touch on this, but just in case anyone missed it, Claire has asked, what do you do with the images that you almost choose? You nearly chose them, but they didn't quite make the cut.
Okay, well, there's two things. I mean, I've said it before. Don't be afraid to kill your darlings, because often things do have a way of coming back. It might be, and also, there might be an image that you absolutely hate today, but in 3 years' time, you'll go, what? That's amazing. And why didn't I use that? And that's so relevant. So it's just that it's not right for that particular moment or that particular project. It's not, sometimes an image is good enough, but it isn't right. It's not about something being the best. It's about being the best for the job that it needs to do, or for the place it needs to be. So and you kind of have to be quite ruthless sometimes, because otherwise you get, I always recommend artists and photographers, artists, anyone using images, if you can, keyword things, so that you can database things in a way that you can search for things, because you often find things long after the fact that you really overlooked at the time that might be relevant for something else later. So nothing's ever really, you've still created it, it's still existed, it's just not been seen at that moment. So yeah, it's all valid, but just not all at the same time.
And Miranda has asked, how important is it to get other people to look at your work, and how do you know who to ask or trust when you're trying to make a selection?
Well, I think that comes with practice. Obviously, there are different people you can talk to. For example, if somebody was coming to me, it's not a good idea for me to give somebody bad advice, because that will come back and bite me on the arse later, because someone said, well, don't go to her, she'll have no idea what she's talking about. There's a reason I've been doing this for over 20 years, and that people keep coming back to me, because they genuinely see I'm into this art form and what it does and how it can be shared from different angles, whether it's through books, exhibitions, sitting for a portrait, whatever it is. So I think, how you find someone you trust is you go from recommendations. You obviously, the people that you trust already are always good, whether that's friends or family. It doesn't have to be somebody in the art world, photo world. And if there is somebody you're thinking about approaching or having a conversation with, see if there is anyone else who knows them. Social media is an amazing thing. You can see who's friends with who. You can see where these connections are. One thing that's amazing about the photo world is I've yet to meet somebody in the photo world who doesn't have a mutual acquaintance, ever. Like, there isn't a one. And I'm talking people all over the world. There's been some random connection somewhere. So you know, who are the sorts of people who do the sort of work you do. They might not do the same project, but might be using the same genre. Go to them and say, look, you know, when you were starting out or when you did a project, who do you show your work to? Ask people. They can only turn around and go, I'm not telling you. Okay, fine. You're exactly where you started. So, you know, and if in doubt, if you get a bad vibe, don't go there. Just think, okay, I mean, I think there's this always this fear of people stealing each other's ideas, but 20 people in a room drawing a life model don't draw the same picture. And the same goes for photography. It's your eye. It's you know, yes, occasionally ideas get stolen. I've seen it happen, but often ideas happen at the same time and the same project happens at the same. I've seen that numerous times where someone's done a project and I go, well, do you know about that person who did it? And they go, oh God, no. So, you know, yeah, go with your gut, but also, you know, ask the people that you trust already and respect, and yeah, see what feedback people give. Whenever I do a portfolio session or a mentor session, I said they get sent a feedback form to fill in if they want to, and I get feedback. You know, was it long enough? Was this, you know, is there anything else you wished you wanted from it? All those things, and so I can keep improving on it. And it's good to have that because you can, you know, ask somebody who's, you know, who I've reviewed, see what they say. I hated her, she was rubbish, or yeah, she was great. You know, yeah. So that would be my advice. You know, do it tentatively, and then yeah, get it. A lot of it's about confidence and being encouraged. Somebody who's there, and I've seen it occasionally in portfolio reviews where you get panels of people who are experts. Some, you know, are great, and others might be on a bit of an ego trip and enjoy. I don't enjoy putting somebody down. I will give constructive criticism, but it has to be constructive. So you do have to be quite thick-skinned because some people aren't particularly diplomatic, but you have to be able to like take it on the chin and go, okay, they weren't my person. Just like your cat chooses you.
Or dog.
You know, or dog, you know, like you kind of, they choose their person in the household. You kind of do that in any community. You choose your people and then stick with them. That was a very long answer, wasn't
it? Sorry. So I think what came through for me was it's about forming a connection. You have to approach someone, but once you form a connection, then you trust them and they feel that they can convey the right message to you. So it might be, no, not these images, but you don't feel crushed, or, you know, or they can help you get to be the right images.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And, you know, one opinion isn't the only opinion. So it might be that you ask several people about the same thing, and then you decide, okay, well, everybody like that, nobody like that, or most people kind of like these. Well, these are somewhere in the middle, and you can make a good estimation of what to put together from that. And again, you know, there's nothing wrong with hedging your bets and seeing where the landscape lies, because you know your work so well, it's hard to separate from it, and a fresh pair of eyes is always a good thing to do that.
I agree. Okay, so Clara said, how do you go about persuading an artist that one of their images that they maybe think is one of their best just won't work in the collection?
I'm honest. I will say, you know, great image, but does it work? I mean, I was in a situation once where there was myself, the photographer, and the graphic designer. We'd laid out, like, we had all the images on this huge wall for putting the book together, and every single one of us had to give up a picture that we absolutely loved for the good of the whole. And it's about the whole, because one, you know, if we'd left those 3 images in, it would have it wouldn't have been as smooth, it wouldn't have flowed. And so we all had to give up something that we loved. And it's like I said before, the image hasn't gone away, it's just not appropriate. So yeah, it's about saying, well, I understand you love it and why, but as a whole, this is, I mean, I've even done layouts for things where I've actually explained why things are in the arrangement they are, to take the eye in that direction or do that. And once I've explained that, I've never had anyone go, well, I don't agree with you still, and I'm off, you know. I'm going to do something else. So generally, if you're diplomatic about it and, you know, firm but fair, yeah, it's okay.
Okay. We have a question which I think is about the hospital photographs, because I
Yes.
think you said the photographer wasn't allowed in.
Well, they weren't, the building had been locked and closed, and for a long time it was, you know, you can see how overgrown it was. She used to work there, well, volunteer there a long time ago. Yeah, and she sort of tried every which way to try and get hold of somebody that she could get permission, and just couldn't get, and it is Italy as well, so you know there's that bureaucratic nightmare. So in the end she sort of snuck over and got in, and she had about 3.5 hours to take the pictures, but she didn't damage anything, or I mean, I think it was knocked down, but it was all, you know, the whole place was just left to go to rack and ruin. But yeah, so
the question really is then, so considering those issues, how was she able to print the book, given she didn't really have permission to take the photographs?
oh, I mean, this is a long time ago, but I don't think anyone particularly cared about it at all, so it didn't become
Right.
an issue.
Okay.
It's
And was
probably
the
different
hospital in
now.
Italy, she did the book in the UK anyway?
It was published by Damiani, so yeah,
Oh,
so an Italian publisher, but you know the images that she'd taken were her images, so she didn't name the hospital, you know, the place wasn't named or identified in the book, so you don't actually know, you know it's in Italy but you don't know where, it's very vague about, so you couldn't say, oh, that's such and such a place, and also because you never see it from the outside, you also couldn't identify it probably from the pictures.
okay, right. So someone has asked, how do you decide how images should be mounted or framed?
That's, well, again, I mean, you can see from the variety of what I showed, and actually I was thinking about this just before, I was thinking, oh, lots of these things aren't framed, and yeah, but clothes are framed. It depends on what you want to do, and also on your budget. Not everybody can afford to frame everything and mount everything. You know, when I did the Photo 50 show, one of the artists, Elizabeth Hayat, her images that I used were, the originals were 1 meter by 1.5 meter silver gelatin prints, and she's based in New York. They didn't have the budget to ship them over or produce them here and frame them, so we did them as wallpaper. She came over from New York. We had them done as vinyls, amazing quality. She oversaw the printing, so we had them, you know, these amazing huge images, full size, directly onto the walls, and then we destroyed them afterwards, which was heartbreaking. And Miranda Gavin, who was also in the show, she had, we did hers like that, and then we had one framed image of her which went on top of one of the vinyls, so it looked like it was on a wall, sort of creating this amazing trompe l'oeil. And one of the, it was funny because I spoke to somebody after the show, long after the show had come down, who was talking about her work and how powerful it was, and who referred to it as framed. And I said, no, they were stuck on the walls. And they're like, wow, I like, because the quality was there. So, you know, sometimes it's worth thinking about, okay, well, okay, you've got a budget, I can't afford to get them all framed, maybe I'll make these in one way and make the others in another, and get 3 framed and do the rest as, you know, do one. Sometimes actually, you know, doing something like that, like a vinyl, you could make something giant, make an entire wall of it that you maybe couldn't afford to do as a big framed print, but kind of get that experience from it. You know, if something's very detailed, you might want it larger to be able to see the detail. There's nothing wrong with small and there's nothing wrong with large. I always suggest it's worth projecting images on a wall and trying them at different sizes, and going out the room and making a cup of tea, and then coming back in and going, do you know what, that's too big. Oh, my cat's going to make an appearance, I think. She can't stay away from me for too long. She's been very good, actually, having a sleep throughout this. She's just going to sit and stare at me, I think. So yeah, so it's up to you, but it's nice to have a good variety. Print them as you want them printed. It's better to do them how you want them and do less than do too many and do them badly. Less can be more. Like I say, if you can pick out those key images, it can be done.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think I heard purring.
Yeah. Will in a minute. She's trying to knock things off the table at the moment. Oh. Story of my life. Bat. Just rubbing her face on everything right now till it falls off. Sorry.
That's okay. So Laura's got an interesting question. She says, what is the most common mistake you come across when photographers select and submit their work? She's talking about their own work.
Ooh, in what context submitting? What, for like a competition or a portfolio?
Let's say in this instance, Laura can jump in and answer that, but let's say in this instance, we're going to talk about they're putting together their portfolio.
Okay. Often a repetition. So a lot of photographers take the same picture multiple times without realizing it. So I've often gone through a point, and it's not a mistake, because your eye is attracted to what your eye is attracted to. But often compositionally, oh, there you go. Somebody's got my water now. They'll take the same picture several times without realizing it. So it might be of a different landscape or a different thing, but the composition's identical.
Right.
So that's kind of one of the most common things. I mean, nothing is ever wrong. It's always adjustable. As long as you're flexible, it doesn't matter. But it is good to have that, second pair of eyes if you can, and see whether there is a repetition in there that doesn't need to be there, or whether it's active. You can usually pick out 3 images in a portfolio and go, okay, pick the best out of these 3, because we don't need all 3.
Right. Okay.
That answers your question?
Yes, I think it does. So another question, someone is asking if you could explain what a portfolio review is. She says she sees them advertised at various places.
Right.
What is their purpose and what happens at one?
It's kind of like speed dating with pictures, but it's so basically a panel of experts are usually invited. So it depends on they're usually at festivals, or like myself, when I do one, it's usually like an hour session, but your average portfolio review is 20 minutes long. So it's not very long. You're sat at a table or on Zoom or Skype or whatever, and you present your portfolio, whether that's virtually as a PDF and someone's looking through it, or whether it's on a table. So festivals like Arles, I do portfolio reviews in. I've had, here we go, here's the cat. Okay, if everyone wants to see my gorgeous cat, there we go. And she's off to go and destroy something else in the house. So you kind of look at the portfolio, so the people that are on the panel. So often people apply to speak to specific people who are doing the portfolio reviews. It's the experts. So you'll have a mixture of everything from people like myself, so curators and gallerists. There might be picture editors from newspapers or magazines, publishers, photographic publishers, writers occasionally who are involved with photography, depending on the sort of angle of the festival as well, or the show, if it's more fine art based or more editorial. So it might be that you've got a project which is very much photojournalism and you think would make sense to show a museum that specializes in war photography, for example. So if there's a curator from the Imperial War Museum, that's somebody you want to go and see. So you sort of select who fits the brief, and you might get it, you might not. So it varies depending on, and you have 20 minutes. So I find people often, like there might be a language barrier. English might not be their first language, so often people have a little prepared statement that they read out to me occasionally, or I just sort of say, okay, you know, my gloves are on, let's have a look, tell me about the project. So I often lead and say, tell me about the project as I'm looking through it, because we've only got 20 minutes, and they will go like a flash. And then that way they relax a bit, because I'm not sort of eyeballing them, I'm looking at their work. And then we have more time to talk about the pictures. And it's that simple. And, you know, it might be that there are specific questions you want to ask that person, or whatever that their job is that's relevant. It might be that, you know, is this interesting to you? And do you think there's an angle there? Or, you know, some people will go, do you know what? This isn't an exhibition, it's a book. Have you got a book, or are you doing a book? Or, you know, so the advice change. I mean, it depends on who you're talking to as to how they're going to look at it. So, yeah. And like I say, you know, 20 minutes or an hour, they all go like a flash. It's amazing how quick they
Yes.
by. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's,
Julie,
that should answer the question, I think.
Yes, no, it definitely does. Definitely does. And I'm sort of keeping an eye on the clock and rushing through the questions. That's why I say.
Oh, sorry, a lot.
No, you're fine. Judy says, what do you charge for a portfolio review?
For an hour session, I charge £99. And if you book more than one, so, you know, it might be that you book 3 sessions for men, and that sort of is more mentoring. The more sessions you book, the cheaper it gets. So your average portfolio review at a festival, I think I worked out I'm cheaper than the average portfolio review at a festival, pound for pound, time for time. And often they run over an hour anyway, but don't tell everybody that, or they'll all expect longer than an hour. But, you know, it is very much, it depends on what you want to discuss, on whether it's an initial 1 hour and doing the session and then following on because something that's come up you want to take further, or, you know, one session's enough and that's it, and you just want help editing something together or putting something together, or, you know, you have one question to ask, or whether you have a whole project which you want to develop. I often come in early before things are finished. People often come to me when they're halfway through something to help with the direction, or to see whether the direction that they're in is going to stick, or somebody's going to respond to it. And it's good. It's that second pair of eyes again to kind of bounce idea. There's a lot of ideas and exchange of ideas happens, which I love, which is kind of how I started doing what I'm doing, actually. So I basically was working at the photographer's gallery in the bookstore as a manager, and I was, every single lunch break I was spending with a different photographer, giving them advice about their portfolio. And I thought, this is crazy. So I started this sort of private consultation. And I mean, this was a long time ago. And this is over a long time ago. And it's continued, and it's always been central to what I do, even as a gallerist and curator. It's always part of it, because it's one of the things I enjoy the most. You know, meeting people and seeing great work. If I don't want to look at pictures, what am I doing here, you know?
Well, that's really interesting, because someone actually asked how you got to be doing your job, and you just answered it inadvertently.
Yeah, grew from there. Yeah.
And I assume you're doing it all online at the moment.
All online at the minute, yeah. Skype or Zoom or whatever. And, you know, some people will send me a PDF in advance of a specific body of work, or a link to their website, and say it's this series or the whole thing. They might in advance say, well, you know, these are the questions that I want answered, or this is why, you know, a lot of people might do a session about how to edition and price their work, or, you know, it might be something very practical, or it might be more theoretical, or, you know, I'm trying to put a book together, or I'm not quite sure what angle this is. It's everything and in between. It's very bespoke, because everyone has a different need depending on their project and what they're doing, or work as a whole.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's a comprehensive answer. Jenny Nash might be a name that rings a bell for you.
Oh, Jenny Nash. She got a shout out earlier.
She's giving a shout out to you as well.
Hey. Yes. Hello, Jenny.
So there's lots of people now saying you've got to the end of the questions, you'll be pleased to know. And everyone is now saying thank you very much. Very informative. They've really enjoyed it. So that's
Oh,
great.
thank you.
Learned a lot,
Thanks
I
for
think.
having me. I really enjoyed that. I don't know how many people put up with me, but it looked like there was
Quite
a
a
lot
lot.
going on there.
Yes, quite a lot. So thank you. That was really great. And I think we've got quite similar tastes in photography from what I saw, because I loved all the images that you
Ah,
showed. Really, really
oh,
inspiring. Yeah.
interesting. Oh, right. Oh, right. Yeah, no,
I'm
because
not saying I take those photographs. I just like looking at them. They're great. I'd love to
I
shoot some of
mean,
that
yeah,
stuff.
I mean, it's much more interesting looking at them than looking at me. So, so up for that. I always try and cram too many images in, but whatever. Have a
It's
look on the
fine.
website. I mean, there's loads of all those
Lots
amazing.
more. Thanks very much. Bye bye.
Bye.